for fiscal year 2012. And Councilman Garvin, would you do our invocation, please?
Our Father in heaven, creator of all things, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this opportunity to serve our people. We ask now that you would lead us and guide us and bring our skills and talents together to come up with a real good budget for our people. We thank you for our health and our well-being. Father, I pray for Janelle and David as they try to restore their health and get well. We just pray that you put your loving arms around them and protect them and restore them to their health. Father, I pray for our country, especially our military and their families here at home. We just pray you to protect them and give them courage. Father, I pray for this committee as they meet this afternoon. We pray that all things will be done decently and in order. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Roll call, please.
Jack Baker.
Here.
Kara Cowan-Watt. Ahani. Buell Anglin.
Here.
Bill John Baker.
Here.
Julia Coates. Here. Jody Fishinghawk.
Here.
Janelle Fulbright. Don Garvin. Chuck Hoskin Jr.
Here.
China Glory Jordan.
Present.
Lee Keener Jr.
Honey.
Dick Lay.
Here and yes.
Curtis Snell.
Here.
David Thornton. David Walkingstick.
Here.
We do have a quorum.
Okay, we do have a quorum. Well, we begin our budget hearings by hearing from our treasurer, Kelly Ketcher, who will give us an overview of the budget. Ms. Ketcher.
Good afternoon, Council.
Good afternoon.
I will actually make this fairly brief, and my first challenge is to work Doug's technology. Okay, that worked. Just want to give you a brief overview of the budget that was delivered to Council. This is the administration's proposed budget for 2012. I'll be presenting this, and as usual, that's a list of the groups that are included in this budget. For those of you who are new council members, this is sort of the organizational chart for the nation, how we break it up between groups. Obviously, we have the different branches of government, but then within the administration, we have the health services, education, etc. Some of the key points when we were developing the FY12 budget, we have the strategic budget group, which reviews all of the tribally funded budgets. And when we have to reduce budgets, the principles we're looking for is to preserve jobs and services to the greatest extent possible while ensuring alignment with strategic initiatives. This year, in order to keep the same level of services that we budgeted in 2011, we had to reduce our contingency reserve by $3 million in order to continue to fund those. The contingency reserve was at $7 million in this proposed budget. We're taking it down to $4 million. Overall, tribal funded budgets are down by about 8% because of reduced carryover, primarily in capital projects and reductions in reserves. The only carryover we've included in the FY12 budget is those that are related to reserves and capital projects, which is consistent with how we did 2011. The actual carryover would be brought forward subsequent to our annual audit, which is normally complete and ready to bring forward in March of the following year. One item to note is for the first time we're actually budgeting or proposing an under recovery in our indirect cost pool. In prior years, we've had significant over recoveries and our rate has continued to go down. This year, we've got a small increase in our indirect cost pool expenditures, primarily in information systems. What that will do probably going forward is the rate will increase a little bit. As of 9/30/10, we had 4.1 million in over recoveries, and that more than would cover this under recovery we're budgeting. As I mentioned, tribal funded budgets are down approximately 6.3 million, primarily in reduced carryover to fund capital and reserves. Dividend income is budgeted at 28.5 million, which is an increase of 1.5 million over the 11 budget. Motor fuels and motor vehicle tax are expected to be relatively flat. Grants and contracts increased a little bit, primarily in the roads programs. As you're aware, we get funding by road project, and we have several years funding in our budget. Health third-party revenue is expected to have a 4% increase. And then one of the additions to the budget that is not included in what was sent to you excuse me, is funding for the charter school. We have not yet gotten a final award letter, but we anticipate getting that very soon, so that will be another resource, another source of revenue for this budget. Just a couple of charts to show the different sources of funds in our tribally funded budget. Tobacco tax revenue, you can see, has flattened out the last few years. Back in 2007, we were running around 8.2 million. That's when we had a tobacco surtax, and we also were getting a rebate from the state. When the compact was renegotiated, the surtax was repealed as well as rebates from the state, so we've leveled out around $6.4 million. Motor fuels tax revenue, again, is still relatively flat, somewhere between 7 million and 7.3 million. This is the check we get from the state of Oklahoma each quarter. The fuels tax compact was negotiated back in '95. Excuse me. And one item to note here is that 25% of that revenue goes into the scholarship reserve and can't be touched until the end of the compact. Motor vehicle tax, we saw a drop in 2009, primarily because of the economy. People weren't buying new cars, so our revenues had gone down. They've rebounded a little bit. We really anticipate 2011 to come in close to what the 2010 actual was, so we should have a little bit of a pickup in revenue there. This is a summary of our tribally funded budgets by group. As you look down through there, because this is at a very high level, there are some decreases. If you look at management resources, that's primarily capital projects. Community services also has some multi-year type funding there for water lines and individual water and sewer. The financial resources line looks like it's going down. That's because the contingency reserve resides there. And overall, 6.3 million less in 2012 than the 2011 budget. Again, that's because our budgets include carryover, prior year revenue that had not been expended. As I said, the budget was developed with the goal of keeping service levels at the same level as the FY11 budget. We reduced the contingency reserve by $3 million to continue at that level. The education group does show a slight decrease. In FY11, they had some one-time funding, which was from the sale of inherited property, and that does not recur in 2012. And then again, the charter school funding is anticipated to offset the reduction in the immersion school budget. We still have a few ARA-funded budgets, primarily roads. Most of these projects, except for roads, have to be completed by the end of September of this year, but By completed, that means encumbering the funds, so we still anticipate about $9 million of our expenditures in 2012. As you can see, that's a large decrease from 2011. One of the things that Doug and I have been visiting with the chair and co-chair is doing a separate capital budget. Our budget has historically been a comprehensive budget, which means it provides authority for spending for all of our revenue, regardless if it's operating expenses or it's capital. And those budgets expire at the end of the fiscal year. What we are proposing is that we're going to isolate some of those capital expenditures or capital-like expenditures and do a separate piece of legislation that would not expire at the end of the fiscal year. It would just carry on until those projects are complete. And the reason I say capital-like expenditures, if you notice, a lot of that money is for our roads funding, and those are not really counted for as capital expenditures because we generally turn the roads over to the county when we're complete. But again, those are multi-year projects, and what we're looking to do is set up a separate project report that we would give you each month as part of your financial package that's going to be separate from the normal operating expenditures. And we have about $105 million in this budget that can be pulled out and accounted for separately. Indirect cost, as I mentioned, we applied the current approved rate, which is 13.73, and the budget submission reflects an under recovery. We've had several years of over recoveries and a steadily declining rate. I feel pretty good going into this, but we will watch it very closely, and if it appears that we're going to encounter any sort of cash flow problem because of under recoveries, we would manage those indirect cost pool budgets very closely. The total full-time equivalent employees that are budgeted is 3422. At the time of the budget submission, 325 of those were vacant, which is fairly close to our turnover rate of 10 or 11%. We had 39 and a half FTEs that were new positions. 6 of those were erroneously identified as new. They should have been listed as an existing position, so 33 new positions in this budget. And this is just a summary of the FTEs by group and by funding source. As you can see, by far, a large chunk of our employees are funded through IHS self-governance, which is our compact funding and also includes our third-party revenue. And then this little pie chart just gives you a breakdown of the revenue by fund. As you can see, Cherokee Nation Tribal is about 17%. That's, excuse me, that is our discretionary funds. IHS is the biggest chunk, as we would expect it to be. And then these are the uses of the funds by group. Again, health is by far our largest group, so they have the largest piece of the pie there. This is a summary of our comprehensive budget by funding source. Shows the revenues, transfers in, transfers out. That's where we're moving money between funding sources for different projects, and overall shows the balanced budget at the tribal level and shows what appears to be a deficit at the indirect cost pool level, which is not really a deficit. It's a projected under recovery, which is more than offset by prior year over recoveries. And that's it. I promise to be brief, so I'm sure there will be questions as we go through these hearings, but I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to give you a brief overview. And
Are there any questions at this time for Ms. Ketcher? Seeing none, we will proceed to the legislative presentation by our CPA, Mr. Evans.
Bear with me just a moment.
Mr. Chairman, Tribal Council. First off, let me begin by saying I want to give a lot of credit to the administration. The comprehensive budget of the Cherokee Nation is a very large endeavor, requires a lot of man hours, a lot of attention, a lot of dedication by the staff to be able to pull off such a huge event. They've done it again and met their timeline, and I think they deserve credit.
Yes, excuse me. Can we have Kelly introduce her staff?
sure,
This
thank
time.
you, Ms. Remiss. Have Galen Thompson. He's the manager of budgets. He's the one who Doug harasses each month if my budget mod doesn't balance. Have Josh. And I have CRS, last name? Davis. Josh Davis. He is our newest member of the budgets group, been with us a couple of months and doing a great job. Have Connie Chandler. She's Director of Budgets and Financial Reporting. We tease her that she never has a slow time. Not only does she do the budget, she also does the CAFR, which is, a very long process, and the monthly reports. So,
And the IDC proposal.
and the IDC proposal. So if you have questions about anything, Connie knows it. And then Tansy Redwater. I think you all know her. Thank you.
We appreciate all of you being with us today.
They did a very good job.
And we really appreciate all your hard work in getting this to us in a timely manner.
Mr. Chairman, I would be remiss if I didn't point out the fact that I couldn't do what I do for this body without cooperation from that group. And anytime that I need assistance or I'm looking for something that isn't apparent on the surface and I need to expand my search, they're always quick to help me get where I need to go. The one thing that in beginning to review this budget, and I do, as always, appreciate the privilege it is to review the Cherokee Nation's fiscal comprehension budget. This budget, fiscal, with an F. This budget encompasses 3 branches, 24 groups, individual groups, over 70 departments, and has well over 400 individual budgets. I think the file they sent over had over 27,000 line items. So again, to pull off and orchestrate something of this size is something that requires a lot of attention. That's why I wanted to give the group back there behind me a lot of credit. This budget, as Callie had mentioned, is relatively flat as it compares to the previous year. It does contain, as she mentioned, over $100 million of capital expenditures. She provided a list, and I've got a list in the book as well. Some major construction projects are going to be underway this fiscal year. We're going to be pulling the Bonita Health Clinic up out of the ground. For one of the larger ones, we've got a lot of roads going on at the same time, not only stimulus-funded roads, but also our normal IRR road program coming in from the Department of Interior as well as Department of Transportation. All references that will be in my book to the current fiscal year, FY11, are projections. I want to make that real clear. Since we're in this year, I took actuals through August 3rd and projected out the remaining 2 months. Keep that in mind when we're looking at comparative data, especially chart data. Sometimes when we project out and people are operating on an expense budget, they tend to wait till late into the fiscal year to expend a lot of those funds till they know exactly where they're at. So we do see somewhat of a spike in spending late in August and September of each year. The 2009 and 2010 fiscal years are audited. So those numbers are what they are. Callie mentioned that, and she had a very nice slide up there about our economic stimulus spend off, and as you can see, we're seeing a reduction of $16 million in our budgets from 11 to 12. She also mentioned the motor fuel tax education trust, where 25% of all of our revenue goes into that education trust. I want to remind the body, and for those that may not know, for the new tribal counselors, that particular trust is collateralized against a construction loan for the Bonita Clinic to the tune of $24 million. And the plan there was to leverage those trust assets in an effort to maximize the financing benefits of that project, even though we were in a time that made it difficult at that time to obtain additional bonding. We chose to seek an alternative method of financing for the Bonita Clinic, and with that, we collateralized. The council agreed to collateralize that loan, and it just so happens that it's such a favorable financial package or financing package that through the use of a hedge instrument called a swap agreement, when we borrowed the money for that clinic, we were able to lock in an interest rate that's actually in net total than what our earnings on the collateral account is. So it's a very favorable financing package for the Bonita. So I wanted to go in just a little bit of detail to explain why we would do such a thing as collateral in an education trust. Okay, very beneficial to the nation at that time. We've talked a little bit about the operating expense versus capital expense. As we move forward throughout this process, no way are we in where we need to be to separate operating expense from capital, but we're taking the first step. And as with any endeavor like this, when you take the first step, you're going to look back and go, well, there's ways we could have improved that, and I'm sure there are. But as we begin this, I think the benefit, not only to the Tribal Council, but all the Cherokee Nations, and specifically the administration, is that we're trying to avoid two things. The lapsing of a long-term project in its authority to spend at the end of a fiscal year. We appropriate a project, $30 million to build a clinic. We keep that authority out there until it's spent. An operating budget is just that. It's for a period of time to accomplish a purpose, and it ends at the end of our fiscal year. The second thing I think is a major benefit is that, as you are aware, especially the returning counselors, that a lot of our analytical review material, specifically charts and tables, can get distorted when you have multi-year grants being compared to a single year of spending, or you have long-term capital projects that's lumped in with a service program that is not going to maintain that level of spending from year to year. So in doing so, that's some of the main objectives here in trying to split these out. It also will help aid in some cash flow forecasting and predicting, which right now when you lump all that together, it gets very difficult to project cash flow. The revenue for the Cherokee Nation is down $73 million as compared to the 2011 year, or 12%, with $20 million of that being in grant revenue. $53 million is in carryover. The grant revenue is on the health and the education service groups at $7 million and $5 million respectively, and smaller decreases on the human service group of $3 million and the housing of $2 million. Part of part of that. Well, I'll get into the details explaining all that a little bit later, but the decrease of $53 million in the carryover is largely in the health group of $30 million and $5 million in the education. Consistent with recent budget practice, the Tribal General Fund is not forecasting, as Callie mentioned, the discretionary carryover, which accounts for about $8 million of that $53 million carryover compared to FY11. Regarding the actual line items of the Cherokee Nation budget, we're very labor intensive in this budget. We have $158 million in there for 3,091 existing positions that at the time of preparation of this budget were on payroll. Another $15 million for 306 vacant positions, for positions that have been budgeted, have been provided for, and either have never been filled or they have been filled but have experienced turnover. And as well as 45 new positions. Now, when we say new positions, what that is supposed to represent is positions that have never been provided for in the budget.
Councilor Jordan.
I didn't mean to stop you, but the 15 million in vacant positions, can you identify those and provide us, or is it somewhere provided in here in summary form?
It is provided in your book at summary form. It goes down to the accounting unit or the actual budget level. The only level that you can go any lower than that would be the actual position titles, and that's not in the book.
Would it be hard for you to prepare just a summary one page of those positions?
Of just the vacants? 300 of them. I mean, it may not fit on one page, but
Just a summary.
certainly.
If you could pull them out of the book at some point during this process and summarize it for us.
Okay. That's no problem. I did want to point out that although this position has 45 new positions in it, that is down 200 from 243 in this year's budget. You recall that there were a significant number of new positions in the FY11 budget. Several of those positions are filled. And as noted in my memo, although the budget provides for 351 unfilled vacant and news, that's down 27% from 482 unfilled positions last year. The budget contains no discretionary, at least I couldn't find any discretionary new initiatives. It does contain a shift of $1.4 million of motor fuel tax funds for the Bonita Clinic over to the IHS Self-Governance Compact. That allows for the higher education scholarship program, as you remember, experienced significant increase in its operating level for scholarships, and we took a one-time funding in FY11 of the encumbrance reserve of the motor fuel tax fund. That was a one-time utilization of funds that's not recurring funding, so that had to be replaced. This year it's being replaced, as I said, 1.4 million of that is through financing the Bonita Clinic out of the compact now that it's a compacted clinic, and the remaining 2.6 from my observation was a large contributor to the contingency reserve being reduced from 7 down to 4 million. We've already talked about the capital expenditures. As noted, appreciate the cooperation of the Treasurer's Office. As stated in recent years, I do continue to see improvement in the budget process here at the Cherokee Nation. I certainly feel that all the work we can do is segregating these capital budgets from the operating budgets will benefit the council as well as the administration. In your book, behind the memo, there's a couple of attachments. The first attachment, A, is an all-group detail of the budget, of the line items of revenues and the types of expenditures, and at the bottom are the funding sources. It's right behind the memo. There is one thing I would point out on there is at the top, you'll notice that the intergovernmental revenue shows a $17 million increase, but yet I just said it's a $20 million decrease. The reason for that is there's a classification of current year government revenue for the roads program of $37 million that is actually prior year. And this is one of those elements where it will distort the picture. So I adjusted this top side. I just want to let you know that the carryover decrease that shows up down below is not a $90 million decrease. It's more in the tune of 53 because of that $37 million road. All it is a classification on this sheet and the way the particular general ledger account number that was used to budget. I just want to point that out. On the next page, attachment B to the memo is the staffing detail. This particular sheet encompasses all funding sources, all positions, and all groups and departments. You can see that the existing full-time equivalents is up, what is that, 169 positions from the existing positions a year ago. Some of this flattening out of these staffing details is going to be somewhat due to one-time funding with economic stimulus that spiked up. Our programs are increasing, especially in the health group. We're seeing a significant increase in operations there. Without those increases on the federal side, I don't see these type of position increases going forward in the immediate future until we start seeing some more tribal discretionary funding increase and either seeing operation levels increase and revenue levels increase with some of our component units. We've got some things that are happening and have happened in the recent past that contribute to these need for additional resources in the form of bodies, which is a good thing. Okay, to begin the actual slides, the first slide I'm going to go over is simply the revenue slide. You can see what constitutes to be a $50 million increase in revenue from 2009, starting at the right side, over to 2010. $24 million of that was the first time the Bonita Clinic construction came in to our appropriation bill. That was 24. Another $8 million for capital expenditures at Hastings facility came in 2010 as well. Another contributor to that was an extra $20 million of IHS revenue. We maintained relatively flat level from 2010 to 2011. There is a $50 million shift, so to speak. You notice in the blue part, the bottom part of the current year revenue of 2010 essentially becomes carryover in 2011. The total available resources don't move much between the two fiscal years, so you'll notice that a $50 million shift up to the carryover green block. And obviously what stands out here is the reduction in 2012. 2012 is showing 553. There is one thing on this chart that I want to go over, the 82 million at the top, the carryover in 2012. I want to talk a little bit about the left side, just the 2012 slide. The green part should be 120 million. 52 million, that represents a $52 million decrease. This is where I'm essentially explaining a top side adjustment why we don't have a $90 million decrease in carryover. Okay, it's that $37 million of roads I explained earlier. That $52 million that should be the carryover decrease actually is 30 million in health, 10 million in general fund, and 5 million in the education group. Therefore, the 471 really is 434 of current year revenues. Okay, so it's not a spike up of $18 million of revenue increase. It's actually about a $20 million decrease. Again, it's due to that classification. And as mentioned earlier, these carryovers are not on the table. There's a significant amount of general fund carryover as well as health carryover that typically comes in January, February, March timeframe that I would anticipate will get up close to around the 2010 level. The next slide is the dividend. As Callie's already mentioned, we've got $28.5 million dividend forecasted in here in this budget. That's 30% of a $95 million forecasted CNB net income. So although we see the economic effect on our business and our dividend level coming in, we seem to have hit the floor in 2010 and slowly working our way back up, getting closer to the 2009 level. That 2008 was $120 million net income, just for comparison. Now on the expenditure side, the bottom part of this slide are the operating expenses. I've excluded all transfers out of this slide. So we remove the transfer effect of moving money essentially from a front pocket to back pocket, so to speak, and how it can distort these slides. Put the capital expenditures at the top. I know we've mentioned 105 million capital expenditures. These capital expenses I've put up here also include the capital acquisitions, one-time type purchases for items that should last longer than a year. They're not just expense, but typically would be capitalized. You'll notice I've also got a lighter green bar here right in the middle of the capital expenses and the other operating expenses, and that's the reserve funds. This is the amount of money that we have set aside each year in some type of a reserve or protected status not to be expended, or reserved for a rainy day, or if you may. And you can see the decrease in the reserve funds here as well. The operating expenses, 418, 454. If we look at those a little bit closer, here's those operating expenses between the last 4 years in comparison to what has actually been expended out of those budgets. Some of the large contributors to the top part of this. Now, this particular slide, I want to clarify, does not include any capital acquisitions or capital projects, does not include any reserves or transfers. So if we're going to say, well, how close can we get to a true operating budget? This is as close as I've been able to get at the current time. Now, going forward, when the financial system begins to be tweaked by the Callie's group, then probably these types of depictions of information will become a little clearer. But on the surface, those exclusions down at the bottom left, the reason those are there is because they can definitely distort their one-time expenditures or their reserve funds. The 2012 418, we'll see that that's up just a little bit of the projected expenditures of 2011. The 70 million right now, or 85% of the current year budget that's being projected to be expended, that 70 million's makeup is largely in the health service group of 27 million, 13 in human services, 13 in education services, and 7 in community services. So that accounts for approximately 60 of the 70. We can look at, again, we go back to the effect of salaries and fringes. And again, just for reference, salaries and fringes are $181 million of this total budget of $555. So we're well over a third of our total expenditure in salaries and fringe, which is good. And you'll see something here I want to point out on this chart, that from 2009 to 2010, $9 million increase in total staffing related budget. $8 million of that is in the service groups. 2011 over 2010 was a $15 million increase, all of it in the service groups. And 2012 is showing another $7 million increase, with over $6 million of that also in the service groups. So when it comes to the government's growth in jobs, we're seeing those jobs prioritized out in the major service groups like they should be, almost entirely, over 90%. The staffing by function is going to resemble the same thing. 2009 to 2010 went up by 44. We saw a growth in total employment from 10 to 11 of 160 or 170, of which 163 are in the service groups. And then this current budget has an increase of 37, with 36 in the service groups. This is a new chart that I put in. Haven't been in the previous year reviews. I wanted, since we are kind of beginning the step to isolate these capital numbers out of this budget, I wanted to pull together what's left, the operating side, but only on those that are either discretionary or like a compact, semi-discretionary in our DOI and IHS. And you can see here where the obvious priority of the discretionary funds are going. This would include casino revenue. It would include motor fuels, motor vehicle tax, indirect cost pool, and both of our compacts, with the vast majority of this being the compact. And it's close proximity, I believe, the actual funding breakout to what the health service breakout of this pie chart is. 2/3 is probably coming out of the total out of that IHS compact. Any questions on this slide before I move on? This is a new slide. I didn't want to rush it. But okay. Callie mentioned the indirect cost pool and the budgeted under recovery. This slide is a graphical depiction of that. You can see that since 2008 we've budgeted a slight over recovery, and obviously we've experienced the same because we're seeing those rates drop from year to year to year. Well, obviously in the organization where you're trying to do more with less and become more efficient and effective operations, this is your resource group. This is the pool that holds the budgets for a significant amount of the support functions to those direct service groups. And obviously when you're trying to hit a moving target, you get closer and closer. You're going to drop below, you're going to stay up, and this is kind of a self-balancing, without getting too detailed into indirect costs. This is nothing, I wouldn't be alarmed about this. It happens a lot when you're trying to hit this moving target. One thing I interpret this, that our effective IDC rate is somewhere between 13.7 and 15.3 of our actual experience. And I can say that we're getting down to close to a historical low when it comes to this indirect cost rate, which is a great thing because, let's face it, if a program has X number of dollars to spend and it has to spend those dollars on direct expenditures and indirect expenditures, and you've got a negotiated indirect rate of 20%, leaving 80 for direct services to the people, And you can manage your way down to a 14% rate. You just added 6% more to direct services. So that's why this is something that we watch, and something that's being, Cali and administration over the years have managed. We're able to bring this down. There's a couple of variables that will come into play on that rate, more than just efficiency. Growth in the indirect cost base, or the actual program funding that pays indirect cost. As those levels go up, then essentially the denominator increases, so you end up with a lower percent. And if you can do more with less while you're in a growth mode as a government, you end up with the effects of a future indirect cost rate reduction. So with that, won't go into later that point unless anyone has any questions of indirect costs. Okay. Okay, we're just seeing some charts here now on the salaries and benefits. These are the dollar amounts we talked about. This next one's the actual positions, the staffing levels. In 2010, we had 526 unfilled, 351 in the 2012, yet we're still growing. This is a good chart. Okay. Now, the obvious decrease here that sticks out is the 243 new positions down to 45 in the 2012. So there's a staff up that has occurred here within the last 12, 15 months. They're coming on, people are on board. We still have vacant positions. We've got 67 more vacancies than we had last year, but we've got almost 200 less new positions. So the net of that is the obvious increase of the existing employees. We're almost to break the 3,500 mark. This next pie chart simply breaks out those 306 vacancies into their respective groups, and obviously you can tell that health is one of the main contributors to that, with 143 vacant positions, and that kind of depicts some of the challenges that they deal with on an ongoing basis of turnover, especially in some of the health service and highly specialized care providers that they're trying to fill. The other one's the human service group with 50 vacancies. The rest of it's pretty small.
That's sufficient.
Yeah, that's what I'm most interested in. I get called all the time saying, why don't we have more providers? Why don't we have drop-in doctors? Why don't we have this or that in health? So I'm very interested. We're trying to ask you about the vacancies. I'm very interested in the health vacancies.
Okay. That 143 number there, 121 is in direct care, 11 in the admin and support department. 121 are in direct care.
Okay.
Now remember, we've got a major clinic that's going to be coming online in 2012 that's contributing to some of these vacancies. I don't know how many are in that staffing package for that clinic.
That's what I'd like to know.
But
Just pull them up real quick and see.
Well, actually, I do know.
Okay.
It would be under the health service tab under Bonita Clinic. Looks like 12.
There's what?
This only has 12 in it. Am I looking at the wrong? No, that's good.
Really, there's more than that.
They may not be fully staffed this fiscal year.
No,
They
they're
may be
not.
looking at the end of the year. Or maybe looking at the end. It's not, only 12 of the 143 is the Bonita Clinic. So obviously they're not planning on staffing that whole clinic till the end of this fiscal year.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I would be happy to bring a report that's going to list all of these vacancies by position. I didn't bring it with me this afternoon, but I can get that for you. I did look at some of those before I came over here. There are some provider vacancies. There's also clerical vacancies that fall under direct care, but I can bring that with me in the morning, or I could send someone over to get it if you want to look at it. Sure.
And I can print it.
Okay.
I just didn't print. I mean, it's such a big list that.
Because that's one of the major complaints I get is we do not have enough doctors and y'all's not hiring doctors. And
Well, let me-
we need them. We need all first class, so I'd like to know which one of the positions we're not filling.
Okay.
Because it's not doing me any good to have the money sitting there.
Yeah, and make sure that we all understand that I'm not saying that the 143 vacancies, 121 are in direct care. Those aren't 121 doctors. Or, you know, I mean, yes, there are some vacancies in the primary care positions or dentists and things like that. But when I say direct care encompasses all positions of the clinic operations, from the physicians to you know, from one end to the other, all positions, including, you know, the administrative positions, the clerical, the facility folks. So anyway, I just want to make that clarification that, but I'm sure there are, like you said, Jody, these others, and I can get that list.
Thank you very much.
Councilor King.
Out of the 306, do we know how many is posted? I mean, I know certainly there won't be for Vanita yet, but, or maybe they are, but.
That's a good question. I'm sorry, I wouldn't have any idea how many of those are posted or when they'll be posted.
But they will be filled, though, at some point in 2012?
Yes, the intention is that they will be filled, and to respond to the posted, Benita probably is already up and looking for those positions to be filled because they want those when the clinic's completed. So, yes.
And just to follow up with that, the existing Bonita facility obviously has some staffing, and I'm not sure when the completion date is right now, but probably a couple months before completion, they will really start recruiting to fully staff that.
Of the 306, we defined a need, so it will still be viable in 2012 for all those 306. Okay. Thank you.
Councilor Fisher.
Just to clear stuff up, because I know we talked about it at lunch, and me and Dick was talking about it. When you get that total of how many wasn't filled this year, would you please go back about 3 or 4 years, like in previous reports it has, that show that last year there was 400, the year before that there was 450 not filled, so we can see a trend?
Yeah, I think that chart, I think the chart right before that,
Okay.
it has a historical.
Oh, no, I mean health. I had one last year.
There's a health slide under your tab
That is- okay.
7
Thank
on the
you.
back of the chart, the second page of the charts.
Okay,
You'll
thank you.
see it would be under tab number 7, Human Service. Mr. King, back in the back of the, or about 8, 9 tabs back where it says Health. Half of the 121 direct service health positions are Hastings of 36 and Muskogee, I believe, of 26, if our memory serves me right. Yeah, Muskogee Clinic has 26 and Hastings Hospital has 36. So those two locations combined account for half of the total vacancies of direct care. Human Services also has quite a few vacancies here. The Children, Youth, and Family Service Department has 19 of the 50. Child Support Enforcement, 12. Food Program, 11. And Child Care, 8. The Career Service Group, the pink, 15. 11 of those are talking leaves that have some turnover. And 3 in the Employment Training Program. Community Services, top left, 18 positions vacant. 6 are in roads, and 6 are in the engineering and sanitation department. And the other 6 are kind of scattered out. Is there any other detail or any other questions on this pie before I move forward? Okay. Did he not see? Mr. Chairman?
Yes, oh, excuse me, Councilor Calvin Watt.
So, we seem to be going down a path on these positions. I'm not opposed to necessarily anything, and we all have our votes, but I'd like to be more informed because I think we're missing big pieces. I think it's one thing if a budget for a position has gone unfilled for 4 to 5 years, those kind of things, or 2 to 3. But if we're looking at turnover, then when you look at just whole numbers of vacant positions that are still being funded, that doesn't tell that story.
That's correct.
If we get information, we need to get complete information, because if we go striking individual jobs or groups of jobs, that's problematic. And the other thing is, what is their funding source? If this is IHS monies, for example, in the health group, that's set aside for those positions, and I would think we risk the loss of that IHS funding, and it would be improper to take it and put it somewhere else if it's intended for those positions. So help me make sure that we're getting all the information here before we head down possible paths. Mr. Chair.
Well, let me respond. The intent behind the vacant and the new positions is a static report. It's at one point in time. When the reason for putting these separate, but yet also presenting the total, the slide right before this one indicated that although we have 305 vacant positions, we have 3,100 existing. And in any organization that experiences anywhere near a 10% turnover, which is going to be close to the norm at least, you would expect around 10% of your bodies to be vacated at some point in time. Health happens to be our largest division that has more employees, but I don't want anyone thinking that I'm certainly not advocating or trying to present through these charts a recommendation of reprogramming any or removing any positions out of this budget. And if there's a way I can present this that would be beneficial and not, I specifically tried to avoid not giving you the whole picture by giving you the existing, the vacants, and the news. But that wasn't my intent.
I'm satisfied, assuming we get all that information. Thank you.
Okay. Did you want to add something, Treasurer Catcher?
I was just going to address her specific question regarding the funding. The funding is not necessarily restricted to those positions, but the funding is for healthcare. And so one of the things we talked about last year, particularly in health, if they have a hard to fill position, they will realign that money to use for PRNs or locum tenens to make sure that the patients are receiving the care. And so it moves maybe from a salary line item down to a contract line item.
Councilor Fisher.
Yeah, I think some of y'all took the comment wrong. Was trying to figure out what I was going to say, and what I'm saying is I don't want any position in health cut. What I'm saying is, folks, I want you to hire doctors and lawyers. I mean, doctors and lawyers. I'm talking about lawyers. I want physicians. I want anybody that is a first care provider hired. I'm tired of us sitting here sandbagging this money and not giving our people the care they need doctor-wise. I don't want health cut. And I think you all misunderstood or was trying to jump ahead of me and didn't quite get what I was saying. Thank you.
Okay. Yes.
Yes, I also too want to make that comment. If I was misconstrued, I did not mean to say I want any cuts either. And also, just want to make one more comment. There is included in the individual groups' budgets the support monies for these 306 positions as well, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
And the new positions, here's the same chart. Maybe. If it'll come up. There it is. Okay. You can see that this number is significantly down from the years past. We still have half the new positions are in the health and education service groups. The 14 direct care have 13 of those 14 positions in health, with the 1 to 2 positions at essentially each clinical location. Education, the language school has 5 new positions in here. Directed studies, 2 positions, and the facilities has 1. And the registration department is coming in with some new positions now into the budget, into government resources. There's 3 new positions for the registration under that slice of the pie, and 3 positions for the digitization project. Any questions on that slide?
No, but there was a handout that only went halfway around. Was there one, did Shelley have one at that end?
It's on his blind side.
Well, I knew that there was some down there, they weren't passing it down. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, that concludes my overview. If there are any questions of what I presented, I'd be happy to answer. Obviously, the book goes into much more detail. It goes into discretionary sources, and I would point out that in your book, the second tab and the third tab focuses primarily only on the discretionary sources of funds that I listed earlier. It does include those compact funds. And to elaborate, since such a big piece of this discretionary dollar is the IHS compact, I list them in there as their quote-unquote semi-discretionary. We don't have latitude of taking IHS health funds over and put it into a road project, obviously. But we do have, under the definition of self-governance, the ability to determine just where should those compact dollars be best spent for the providing of healthcare services to the people. That's what the second and third tab of the book is. One sorted by where the funds come from, and the third tab is sorted and grouped by our actual groups of who's spending these dollars. Okay. Now, I know last year and the year before we spent an enormous amount of time in these hearings focused on the second tab of the book. And in that book, behind that second tab, I again have this one-page summary of all sources of funds, and immediately it goes into a 9-page detail of those discretionary dollars with a 3-year historical spend. Just want to point that out. I know we've looked at it several times, but that tab there will, when it comes to the actual dollars of offer any latitude here to the council, that those tabs are the ones that I would recommend you focus your efforts on if you need to get into a lower level detail analysis or review.
Okay. Well, this time I would entertain a motion for the approval of the budget.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded, and now we're opening it up for discussion so that if there's any motions to change anything, we can do that. I just want to make myself clear. It's not that I'm pushing through that we immediately approve this, but before we get into discussion to change things, we have to have the motion and the second to discuss it. Okay. So now we're open for discussion. Do we want Doug to continue with his detail on the tabs?
I have several motions to make if we don't want to go into if we don't want to drill it down some more.
Do whatever you want to do.
It's up to this body.
Let me ask you this. Jake, before we start this, could we take about a 10-minute break? Because I want me to make a copy of this probably to share with the whole council.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Would that be possible?
Chair will recess for 15 minutes.
I have one or two. Can I just add a bit so everybody's looking at once?
Yes.
Thank you.
Back to order. Okay.
Okay, I had a friendly,
Do we need a roll call? We obviously have,
We need a secretary.
can you ask Shelley to call the roll? I mean, we obviously have a forum, but we need to identify it.
it's a friendly, here, if it's a friendly, we don't need a second.
That's right.
As long as the
You did.
motion and the second accepts.
Okay.
Okay, would you call the roll, please?
Jack Baker,
Here.
Kara Cowan Watts,
Bonnie,
Buell England,
Here.
Bill John Baker,
Here.
Julia Coates, Jody Fishinghawk,
Here.
Janelle Fulbright, Don Garvin, Chuck Hoskin Jr.,
Here.
China Lori Jordan,
Present.
Lee Keener Jr.,
Me.
Dick Blake, Curtis Snell,
Here.
David Thornton, and David Walkenstick.
Here.
We do have a forum.
We do have a quorum. Any discussion on the budget? Councilor Jordan.
Yes, I would offer a friendly amendment to the motion on the budget, and I would like to go through these all as one motion. 1010458 on the clothing for kids vouchers, I would like to add $300,000 to be specifically used for coats in December of each year, December of this coming year, for the children that have already received vouchers in July and August. On sports teams, which is 1010025, we would like to add $15,000. On livestock auctions, which is 1010026, we would like to add $15,000. In charitable contributions, and I do not have the numbers, so I'm going to ask Callie possibly if she could fill those in.
10-10-042.
10-10-042, we would add into charitable contributions, Boys and Girls Clubs, an additional $50,000, and the area backpack programs, an additional $50,000. And 1010431, that's individual water / sanitation, $150,000. 1023055, that's the community youth grants, which, if you all will recall, we ran out of money even before mid-year, I believe, $85,000. Indian Child Welfare, 1010147, $150,000. And then also in Indian Child Welfare, 1010148, $50,000. And what this is we understand that when an extended family member takes a child, they are not paid a stipend. But if we send that child to a non-relative family, they are paid a stipend. So we're adding the additional money to make sure that the grandparents who are taking the children into their home will be paid the same stipend as the non-relative family. 1023030, minor emergency repair. That has always been an area where we run out of money, $100,000. 1010693, Head Start After School Program, 200,000. 1010700, council legal fees, 85,000, and 1010700, council community assistance, 255,000. Now and down at the bottom, the tribal burial program, which I'll have to get the number from Callie on that. We would like to develop a program for the slightly over income, over the VIA income limits, and put 50,000 in there. We had several times in the past year, a number of times in the past year where they were $50 or $60 over income, and we could not serve them at all. And I'm really, frankly, I don't know how those people even got buried.
Okay. That accounting unit is 1010-370.
1010-370.
Correct.
Okay. Now, Callie, you'll have to help me on this one too. As you heard this morning, we're going to fail to give out 2,000 light heat blankets because of a shortage in that program. And I realize that we probably can't order the identical light heat blankets because of the time limitations, but we have 2,000 people out there that need their blankets for this year. And we were told this morning that that was going to be about a $35,000 hit for Norma Merriman's group. If you could find that number for the light heat blanket.
I got it right here. It's 1010-460.
Okay. And then we used to have a program until about 2 years ago that was quite successful and relied on heavily, which was the Education Emergency Assistance Program, which allowed kids that had some unusual circumstances come up during the year. There was a little pot that we could take care of those circumstances. It was no more than $500 per child, and we would like to add that back in for $25,000. And Callie, again, I don't have that number.
It's 1010-500.
Okay. And then the last thing is to add 50,000 back into charitable contributions, which is going to be 10-10. Is that 10-10-12, Callie? Charitable contributions?
That is 1010-042.
10-10-042.
And I apologize, what was that addition?
To add 50,000 back into charitable contributions, which will be used as a matching amount for the foundation, the Cherokee Nation Educational Foundation, to raise scholarships for directed studies. It'll only be used as a match. As they receive a donation of, say, $5,000, and we will match it for $5,000 up to $50,000. And that would be to the Cherokee Nation Foundation. And we are holding until carryover, replacing $300,000 in roads, motor fuel tax, roads construction that was moved out last year and not replaced in this year's budget until the carryover. So that will not be part of what we're requesting today in this motion. And we're also holding the summer youth program. We are asking for an additional $500,000 to beef back up that summer youth program, but we're asking that idea be held till carryover. We just wanted to give Callie a heads up that there's another $800,000 in play when we get to carryover. And then what I would like to do within this motion is give Callie and her group an opportunity to come back with the sources so that we have a balanced budget. We have 3 sources, Callie, you will see on that paper, but I think that you have some other ideas. So,
on the paper that was passed around, it's been proposed to reduce government relations $200,000, communications $200,000, and the balance from the contingency reserve. I was visiting with Melissa Gower, and in government relations, we do believe that we have $125,000 in the Get Out the Vote budget. We can reduce that by $100,000 and reduce government relations by $100,000, which would give us that $200,000. Communications, I believe that would be okay. There are several vacancies that we'll just have to remove. Then the other proposal, and it's the only source that I can come up with without going through each and every individual budget and starting to do cuts, which is going to affect some of the other services. The other source would be the contingency reserve. And I would be remiss if I didn't tell you I am very, very concerned with doing this, what has been proposed, because we've already utilized some of our contingency reserve in this proposed budget to keep services at the same level as FY11. These are increasing some areas, yes, maybe taking it back to prior year levels, but my fear is that we're setting an expectation that we're not going to be able to continue, and it also takes our contingency reserve down to just over $1 million, which is not a whole lot of room to play with. In March, when we get carryover, it's possible that we can replenish that, but this is going to be a very tight budget year, and the feds are talking budget cuts. So, just as your treasurer, I'm concerned about taking our contingency reserve so low.
Okay. One item, the 1010700, I believe that is to come from a reallocation of the current tribal
Yes.
council fund.
Both of those items?
Yes.
Hold on.
We have additional information. I'd
Wait.
like-
Councilor Watkins.
What's our carryover looking like in March?
In prior years, we've been able to bring quite a bit forward. I believe last year was about $9 million.
What is it at?
I don't remember off the top of my head. Do you remember? 2010's carryover, it was 11.
11 million?
Yeah.
Okay, right, thank you. So that'd be a reallocation.
Councilor Calvin Watts.
Thank you. I'd like Doug Evans to speak to, we didn't quite get where we had hoped using the council budget. So I think we have more to discuss. I don't think it was going to be, I thought it might be clearer. I was hoping it might be easier, but we're not in the place where we had hoped.
The net increase is $340,000. Is that the right number?
Yes.
255?
340.
340. One thing to point out, the indirect cost pool funds approximately half of the council's budget. However, there are some line items that are not qualifying for IDC funds. These two do not qualify for indirect cost funding. Okay? So the legal fees and the community assistance has to be funded entirely out of the general fund accounting unit. So to lay that burden over on the 1010-700 side of our budget, even if we remove the vacant positions out of our budget, I still don't see room in that side to fund all of this and make room in our budget, or the travel and supplies and rent and everything else. We're going to blow our budget by probably May, June. That's what I predict. Now, if there is, whatever the will of the council is, or speaker, I'll try to do whatever I can within this budget, but this is going to be a challenge. I don't see any way of making that much of a line item reallocation on this one accounting unit. If maybe we could do a combination of partial funding increase on this one AU and partial, put on hold some of these, couple of these vacant positions, and then maybe bring them back later when carryover comes forward. Possibly could make that work, but just to make it all out of a line item reallocation, I don't think I can do it.
Have we considered cutting those two items in half at this time? Would that fit into the budget. Would that fit into the budget if we cut it in half? It's just that'd be 170,000 instead of 340.
Roughly.
Identified 100, right?
Identified 100.
Councilor Austin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and all of these adjustments we're talking about, you just suggested halving those two. Certainly, we could revisit in March, look at the carry forward, and try to make up, because I think we do need to fully fund this community assistance, and I think halving it is just that, it halves it, gets us halfway where we need to be, but we need to revisit it in March. So if there's going to be a cutting, I sure want us to be committed to fully funding it come March. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Calvin Watts.
Thank you. I'm not opposed to any of these, but given the new information from our own budget, where I thought we were going to be able to make up a significant portion of that, and then Callie's statement, I think I was upfront about my heartburn about lowering the contingency reserve. That's in a significant way. Can we revisit at least those two large items at a later time, or just put a smaller placeholder under the 100,000 that we can reallocate under our budget? Or, I know I'm not planning any lawsuits, so there won't be any money, from my portion or anyone that might be affected. I guess Councilman Snell may have raised his hand, so I guess he has something I don't know about. But if I would, the Constitution's very specific that we cannot spend money we don't have above our projected revenues. And without having contingency reserve, should something drastic happen, which is we're very much at risk for on the federal side. They're even talking about, they've already reduced our HUD allocation. We could even have a greater reduction in just housing alone. We would have to make, if we were going to make it up anywhere, it would be through our own funds and being able to sustain the government should there be cuts or shutdown. So, I would accept this as a friendly amendment, but we need to get those down as a reallocation to council within that 100,000. And I'm hoping we really don't spend anything off of it so we can revisit it when we know actuals, to be frank.
Oh, here's what I'd like to do and back up. We'll delete for now the legal fees of $85,000, and we will reduce the community assistance by $51,000. That brings it down to 12. And then that's the essence of my motion.
But may I clarify a point of information? So that, if I heard you correctly, was to eliminate the $85,000 in legal fees at this time, then the community assistance fund would go to 200,000, or was it 100,000?
It would go to 204.
204. That still doesn't get us to the 100,000 within our budget.
100,000 increase would be a lot better. We could do that.
Stand up and tell me CPA.
If we could, in doing that, the 204,000, half of that, I think I can make up with what we've identified within our budget, and the
But before
100,000.
anything actually happens, I want to see this on paper and make sure that it's clear, because I can't manage that budget and have us.
It's
take money
basically
from
those
something we
positions.
actually- Okay.
It's removing those positions.
But keeping the additional staff person out here on the legislative assistant.
Yeah, for 100,000 of the 204, but the other 104 would still need to be provided somewhere.
Through contingency fund then?
Or, however all the rest of this is going to be funded by.
Okay, and just so all minds are clear before, so what is the contingency fund? If that is the friendly amendment, like just stated, what does that leave us for contingency fund to cover people's salaries should all heck break loose?
Would come out of contingency. That sounds.
3.3.
Okay, so what does that leave us in contingency, and how many months of salary or weeks of salary would that cover for operating costs and
It
such?
leaves you $3 million.
It would leave us $3 million in contingency, and that would cover 3/5 of one payroll.
So we would not even have one payroll.
Well, just, as a cash reserve.
Karen,
Okay.
we don't have one payroll with 4 million.
I know that's what,
Yeah.
350,
So,
So, if our calculations are correct, we would reduce our contingency reserve another $1,104,000. And I just want to read these if you'll bear with me to make sure we're on the same track. We would increase 10-10-700, $104,000 to partially fund the community assistance of 204. The other 100,000 would be through reallocations. Then on the reductions, I have get out the vote, which is 10-10-041, 100,000. Government relations 10-10-040, 100,000. Communications 10-10-090 for 200,000, and contingency reserve 10-10-290 of $1,104,000.
what was that last one,
You
Cal?
got a running total on that?
Contingency reserve
And how much was it?
$1,104,000.
And that is my motion. My request for a friendly amendment to the original motion.
I'll accept.
Okay, and will a second?
I thought we had the idea.
Question?
Wait. Is,
Do you have an amendment to the friendly amendment before you accept? Is that what you're saying?
We do have, go ahead.
you yield your time to Councilor Keener?
Who has the floor?
Will you do asking for your,
Yes. Yes, I yield to Lee.
Okay. I guess this is the discussion first. As I'm understanding, how will this be split 5 ways per district? The money allocated. Does that help? 3 ways?
Well, 3 ways within your district.
Well, just to simplify, let's just say 5. So, is that correct?
You want to divide that by 5 districts?
So if the total's $25, and each district gets $5 of this amendment.
really it's based on a per counselor.
Oh, well, okay, per counselor.
Right, it is. Well, other than the fact that the large is in there also.
17 times 17. Or divided by 17.
Okay, let's double check our figures here, Lee. I mean,
Okay.
if I could you defer to me for just a second. 204, it would be divided 17 ways and it would come out 12 per person.
Okay.
12 per position. Is that right? Yeah, 12 per seat.
Yes. Okay. And that will be, is that just an understanding that that's the way it's going to be? And forgive me, I don't know the procedure on this, but
Add it into
Can I,
this.
To clarify for you?
yes.
There'll be a spreadsheet that
Okay.
has your name at the top.
Okay.
It'll have an amount, and then as you help your community, it'll be deducted off, and you'll have a balance every month.
Okay.
You haven't seen the law enforcement and those other things yet, but Doug will keep it in balance all the time, so you know exactly what's available.
Okay.
And some of you may go together in a district.
Sure.
But
Right. Yeah.
give us the same amount each.
Starting at the top, clothing for kids, each district will get up to 60,000,
No.
No.
and each road.
No, the other items are not by district.
Pardon?
The other items are not by district.
Which one are by district?
There's actually none by district. It's the community assistance is by council.
Just that one?
Yes.
Oh, I thought all of them were the split 17 ones.
No, I don't accept that. I mean, these should be divided by 5 districts. If not, some of the districts get all the money and the other districts, it's like that.
Okay, then I'll put that in the form of a motion,
Okay.
separate from the original motion.
And is there to amend?
To
the proposed budget to
Yes,
this.
to amend the proposed budget.
So is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Discussion. Councilor Hoskin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did want to make the record clear on a couple of these because we did this before, and last time there was some confusion that kind of endured well into the fiscal year to the point where there was a delay in getting some money spent. One of them had to do with the backpack program. I understand the idea is that every backpack program that we've already identified in Cherokee Nation, not just those ran by the Boys and Girls Club, but for example in Craig County where it's actually the Salvation Army, just want to make clear that those organizations are getting assisted. I also want to make clear, and I think Councilor Fishingham can speak to this better than I can, but the nutrition sites, the food pantries, we're funding that in this amendment, is that right? If I could yield to Councilor Jordan.
My understanding in talking with Callie is that they are already funded in the current budget that you proposed for $80,000.
That's the food pantries.
And that's why I did not put them in
Okay,
this.
and we can get some more clarification on this in the appropriate committees, but I want to make sure that the money gets to these individual organizations as opposed to just going into the program and then getting divvied up different ways. I think the intent was that 2,000 should go to these organizations. So just because last time we had to go back heavily to these minutes to make sure the administration understood what we meant. So that's why I want to make sure the minutes are reflective of that. And otherwise, I fully support this, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay.
Just if I could clarify the motion, and we're still punching in numbers and verifying back there, could we just make it that the balance of the reduction would come from the contingency reserve? Because they're double checking. The first number I had was 1,104,000, but now I think it's 1,000,004. So.
Okay. Councilor Jordan.
Is it verified, Doug?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, so it is
I
verified
did
now.
drop it by that extra 100, but there was a question on the flags for Veterans Office.
Oh,
That was deferred.
Okay. Then it's a 1,004,000 reduction.
1,004.
That's the decrease in the contingency reserve, not the balance.
So the motion's been made and seconded. Is there further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, the motion carried. Is there any further discussion on the overall budget? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It is an act, so we should have a roll call.
Jody Fishinghawk,
Yes.
Janelle Fulbright, Don Barman, Chuck Hoskin Jr.,
Yes.
Tanya Gloria Jordan,
Yes.
Lee Keener,
Yes.
Dick Lay,
Yes.
Curtis Snell,
Yes.
David Thornton, David Walkingstick, Kara Cowan Watts, Bill Englund,
Yes.
Bill John Baker,
Yes.
Jack Baker,
Yes.
Julia Coates, we have 12 yes and 0 no.
Okay, motion carried. There's no further business before the budget hearings. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned.